Good day, anonymous viewer on the other side of the screen. Thank you for your time. I thought it would be fitting to start off my YouTube channel by hitting the ground running. With this in mind, I can think of no better topic to engage you with in our hyper-digitalized, entitled, and narcissistic generation than gratefulness, and why we should wage war on the demonic attacks of discontentment in our lives. Simply, because our livelihoods depend on it. It should come as no surprise to you that many people in the world today live in relative comfort, convenience, and expedience. The majority of people in middle-class society today, however impoverished they may feel, still get to enjoy a larger variety of luxuries than what most of the wealthiest people in human history ever got to experience in their time. Think about it: vacuum cleaners, dishwashers, refrigerators, air conditioners, computers, air travel, the internet, all of which make our lives 10 times more convenient. None of these existed before the 1900s. Yet, despite our generation being the outliers in human history with the absolute deluge of creature comforts, we are among the most impatient, ungrateful, entitled, and wasteful people to have ever coexisted at the same time on our planet. As it turns out, there are multiple different social, economic, and spiritual factors that mix together like a poisonous cocktail to spite our thinking, our relationships, and ultimately, our spirituality. And of all the different vessels through which this poison is administered, one of the most effective, yet unobtrusive, is discontentment. For clarity, the Merriam-Webster defines discontentment as a state of being dissatisfied with one's life or situation. On a deeper level, it is the deep-seated belief that we are being denied, robbed, something better in life, and to act on it in a destructive manner. Now, it is very important for me to take such an aggressive position against it, because most of us will agree that discontentment is a bad thing, but very rarely will we actually try to rid it from our lives. And what this tells me is that, as with most unassuming sins, we know that they are bad, but we don't understand why they are so serious. While we might begrudgingly admit that our chronic dissatisfaction with life is a sin in the theoretical sense, we very rarely treat it as one. We rarely treat it as one, ultimately, because we are ignorant of how destructive it is in our lives, and would thus sooner try to satisfy our greedy impulses than starve them. As a result, this sin, along with every other type of passive, indifferent, and ignorant hard posture towards God, becomes a silent killer that robs us in blind daylight. And we only usually realize it afterwards, when the damage has already been done and there's nothing we can do about it, leaving us with nothing but regret and an even greater dissatisfaction with life. And so my hope is that as we go through this video, that the various enemies to our joy will be exposed. Not so that we can guiltily sit upon a heap of ash and feel miserable about ourselves, but so that we will be empowered to intentionally oppose every attempt to sabotage our relationship with God, to sour our relationships with others, and to steal our joy and livelihood. Now, before I go any further, let me just admit from the get-go that this is also something that I struggle with in my own life. And it is only because I've been made to realize the seriousness of my own ungratefulness that I am so adamant to expose it for the problem that it is. So, as we go through this video, please keep in mind that every time I issue a challenge to you, it is only because 3 fingers have already pointed back to me. With that being said, let's get started. The first reason why all Christians should intentionally try to eradicate discontentment from their lives is because it sabotages our relationship with God. From the beginning of creation, this particular emotion has very effectively driven a wedge between God and His creation, and has caused great pain and suffering because of it. To understand the evil roots of this fallen emotion, the best place to start is the beginning. It's Genesis, if you will. If we use the Genesis story as a case study for the origin of all immoral human nature and every depraved emotion that comes with it, what you'll quickly realize is that in God's perfect creation, there was originally no precedent for ever feeling dissatisfied or unhappy with God in any way. We know this because God declared all of creation to be good. As it reads, "Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has breath of life within it. I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that He had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. Because God declared all of creation to be good, we can surmise that it wasn't incomplete, lacking, or leaving anything else to be desired. At the end of the creation account, after man had received his helper, the woman, he was free to live in unbroken harmony with nature, had every need supplied for, and walked in complete fellowship with his Creator. Thus, the first humans never had any reason to be dissatisfied or unhappy with God in any way, and they originally weren't. What does this tell you? that the original sense of discontentment was first introduced externally through an agent of evil, i.e., the serpent, as it reads in Genesis 3, verse 1 to 4. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat from any tree in the garden'?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, 'You must not eat from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.'" "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." From the story, we can conclude, without over-spiritualizing anything, that there has always been a demonic element involved in us feeling dissatisfied with life. The only time Adam and Eve had doubted God or felt that he had cheated them was only after the serpent had convinced them that he was holding out on them by denying them the nature of deity. You see, discontentment always goes hand in hand with doubt, either that God is good or that what God is doing in our lives is good. So at this point, a valuable question to ask ourselves is, how often do I actually pause to examine those small voices whispering in my ear that I am being robbed, denied, cheated, stolen from? Or do I blindly accept them as truth without further inspection? And I ask this question because it is important for us to understand that the problem with discontentment was first introduced by external influence before it became a part of our internal nature. And this is a very valuable piece of information if we are to effectively combat this fallen emotion, because you cannot fight an enemy if you don't know what it is and where it comes from. Regardless, to sum up the rest of this Genesis story, Adam and Eve acted on their dissatisfaction, ate of the forbidden fruit, and got themselves kicked out of the Garden of Eden for disobeying God. So it's important for you to understand that this problem with discontentment isn't just a big deal because it once brought the cosmic separation between God and his creation a few millennia ago, but because it also sabotages your relationship with God to this day. Let me prove it to you. If you will recall the Genesis story of a few moments ago, what you will remember is that among the first wrongs Adam had committed was that he allowed his feelings of dissatisfaction to lead him into disobedience. Consequently, all of creation was brought under God's curse and suffered accordingly. As it reads in Genesis 3, verse 16 to 19, "To the woman he said, 'I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you.' To Adam he said, 'Because you listened to your wife and ate the fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return.'" As you are aware, this curse isn't just some abstract ancient boogaloo. The same suffering that plagued the first people in creation also plague us on a daily basis. All of humanity is subject to weakness, frailty, pain, sickness, decay, and eventually death. Our relationships are fickle and self-serving. Our work is strenuous and frustrating, debilitating, and many times meaningless. How often have your best efforts turned up naught? How often have you done everything right and still lost? How often have you worked hard, pulled out all the stops, and left nothing on the table, and still had nothing to show for yourself? That is the curse of this world, and it is a stark reminder of what happens when humanity is separated from God. As it says in Ecclesiastes, "I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened, what is lacking cannot be counted." And that is where the stronghold of discontentment will kick you while you're down. Because the ungratefulness, entitlement, and misery that it produces serves to undermine your relationship with God, who would have otherwise given meaning and purpose to every one of those moments of pain, suffering, and misery. The Bible says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." But when you allow petty emotions to corrode away at your relationship with God, when you blame him for everything you don't have, you effectively undo a lot of the good he has planned for your life without even realizing it. And the more you allow your own entitled sense of petty dissatisfaction to drive a wedge between you and your Creator, the less meaning your life will have in the present moment, and the more you open yourself up to the destructive consequences that your own short-sighted ambition will inevitably bring you. And that brings me to the second reason why all Christians ought to purge this emotion from our lives. Because it brings suffering upon others. In the book of Numbers, which takes place at around 1444 BC, Moses had already led the nation of Israel out of Egyptian slavery and towards the Promised Land. Keep in mind that for the entirety of their wilderness wanderings, God supplied every need that they might have. As it reads in Deuteronomy 2 verse 7, "The Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hands. He has watched over your journey through this vast wilderness. These 40 years the Lord has been with you, and you have not lacked anything." Deuteronomy 8 verse 4 reads, "Your clothing did not wear out on you, nor did your feet swell these 40 years. Deuteronomy 8 verse 15 to 18 reads, "He led you through the vast and dreadful wilderness, that thirsty and waterless land with its venomous snakes and scorpions. He brought you water out of hard rock. He gave you manna to eat in the wilderness, something your ancestors had never known, to humble and test you so that in the end it might go well with you. You might say to yourself, 'My power and strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me.' But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms His covenant, which He swore to your ancestors, as it is today." In many ways similar to the Garden of Eden, God provided for them, protected them, and supplied for every need that they might have. And what was their response to this? Ungratefulness and complaining. Let me give you a few examples. In Exodus 16 verse 2 to 3 it reads, "There too the people spoke bitterly against Moses and Aaron. 'Oh, that we were back in Egypt,' they moaned, 'and that the Lord had killed us there. For there we had plenty to eat, but now you have brought us into this wilderness to kill us with starvation.' Another chapter later, they did it again. Now, at God's command, the people of Israel left the Sin Desert, going by easy stages to Rephidim. But upon arrival, there was no water. So once more the people growled and complained to Moses. 'Give us water,' they wailed. 'Quiet,' Moses commanded. 'Are you trying to test God's patience with you?' But tormented by thirst, they cried out, 'Why did you ever take us out of Egypt? Why did you bring us here to die with our children and cattle too?' Then Moses pleaded with Yahweh, 'What shall I do? For they are almost ready to stone me.'" We see this attitude again in Numbers 11, verse 4 to 10. The rabble with them began to crave other food, and again the Israelites started wailing and said, "If only we had meat! We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, all the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna." Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance to their tents. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. You see, in their relative comfort, they quickly forgot about how much worse they had it in Egyptian captivity, when they were nothing but abused, impoverished slaves that had nothing to do but trudge in mud all day long to create bricks for the constructions of pyramids. As it turns out, this ungrateful attitude and lack of perspective is also a prelude to what the nation would go through after eventually conquering the Promised Land and reaping all the wealth, abundance, and prosperity that came with it. Simon Sinek calls it destructive abundance. In his book, Leaders Eat Last, he describes it as follows. "Abundance can be destructive, not because it is bad for us, per se. Abundance can be destructive because it abstracts the value of things. The more we have, the less we seem to value what we've got. And if the abstraction of stuff makes us value it less, imagine what it does to our relationships. By its very nature, scale creates distance, and at distance, human concepts start to lose their meaning." This is exactly the problem that had occurred with the people of ancient Israel, that they could not maintain an appropriate perspective on reality for any significant amount of time. Whereas God provided for every need that they might have, they allowed their own short-sightedness and lack of vision to consume them. And sooner, rather than later, they became disgruntled, entitled, and ungrateful. As with all problems of discontentment, it didn't merely stay as petty feelings, but very quickly went over into destructive behavior that not only hurt them, but also the people around them. In the book of Numbers, chapter 14, verse 1 to 4, it reads, "That night all of the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, 'If only we had died in Egypt, or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?' And they said to one another, 'We should choose a leader and go back to Egypt.'" How petty, short-sighted, and foolish were they not? They would sooner abandon unknown blessings just so that they could return to familiar suffering. This is how discontentment brings sabotage into our relationships with others. You see, not only do we underappreciate godly leadership, like Moses, not only do we sabotage the efforts of others, like Joshua and Caleb, not only do we disrespect the sacrifices made by those who are trying their best for us, like Aaron, but we also drag others down along with us. They say misery loves company, and as the historic account details it, the faithless dissatisfaction of a few people was enough to sour an entire nation's relationship with God, leading to a pointless rebellion that brought nothing but greater suffering back upon themselves and also those around them. As the historic account details it, then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, "How long must I endure this evil community that keeps complaining about me? I have heard the Israelites' complaints that they make against me. Tell them, as I live, this is the Lord's declaration. I will do to you exactly as I heard you say. Your corpses will fall in the wilderness, all of you who were registered in the census, the entire number of you 20 years old or more, because you have complained about me. I swear that none of you will enter the land I promised to settle you in, except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. I will bring your children, whom you said would become plunder, into the land you rejected, and they will enjoy it. But as for you, your corpses will fall in this wilderness. Your children will be shepherds in this wilderness for 40 years and bear the penalty for your acts of unfaithfulness until all your corpses lie scattered in the wilderness." Fast forward to the book of Judges, and again what we see is that even after the nation of Israel had now completed their wilderness wanderings, conquered the promised land, and reaped all the wealth, abundance, and prosperity that came with it, God's goodness still wasn't good enough for them. Why do you think that is? It's because if you do not appreciate the blessings of God, then the accompanying expectations from God will always seem like nothing more than a hindrance to your continued euphoria. In a very real sense, the people of Israel felt like God, with all of his hundreds of Levitical laws, was denying them, stealing them, robbing them a greater sensual experience. As a result, the people, in their discontentment, very quickly turned away from God and gave themselves over to idol worship that permitted and even celebrated every one of their animalistic and barbaric impulses. They quickly abandoned the Lord and all of his rules for civility, justice, and morality, and became a nation described as one where everyone did what was right in their own eyes, whatever seemed right to them. And who suffered the most because of it? The innocent people. The nation had corporately turned its back on God, and so God judged them by temporarily handing them over to the consequences of their own rebelliousness. And for the next 300 years, the nation was subject to torment, suffering, and oppression at the hands of their enemies. It happened exactly as God had predicted in Deuteronomy 28, where it reads, "The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You will come at them from one direction, but flee from them in 7. And you will become a thing of horror to all the kingdoms on earth. Your carcasses will be food for all the birds and the wild animals, and there will be no one to frighten them away. Because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and gladly in the time of prosperity. Therefore, in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies the Lord sends against you. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has destroyed you." In that same way, we place ourselves under God's judgment every time we allow our feelings of discontentment to turn us away from the Lord and towards whatever else promises us a larger dopamine hit. It might not seem as severe in the modern day context, but idol worship is just as prevalent today as it was back then. And just like with the people of ancient Israel, our feelings of chronic dissatisfaction will almost always lead to misery, rebellion, and desecration, not only hurting ourselves, but also those that didn't deserve it. So at this point, a valuable question to ask ourselves is, how often have I felt dissatisfied with my life? How often have I felt robbed, cheated, stolen, that which I was rightfully owed? And then, perhaps a more important question to ask is, how many people have I backstabbed or betrayed or shortchanged to get what I wanted? How many times have I allowed my misery to drag others down along with me? How many times have I ruined the joy and peace of others simply because I couldn't get my way or go to where I wanted to be? You see, it's one thing to sit miserably upon a heap of ash and rage to God about everything we don't have. It's another thing to allow those feelings of discontentment to turn into greedy ambition, because more often than not, it is a strange way of being at the expense of those around us. And that brings me to my third point, that while discontentment brings sabotage into our relationship with God, and while it brings suffering upon others, it then also brings a lasting regret after it has sabotaged our relationship with God and others. When we engage in comparison and become dissatisfied with our lives, what we have and who we get to be around, we very quickly become absent-minded and forgetful of that which we do have and would have otherwise been grateful for. How ironic, considering that most feelings of discontentment have us believe that we are being robbed of something, when in reality it is the very feeling of discontentment that steals our livelihoods. And seen as discontentment almost always springs forth from a faulty perspective of what we have and what we think we're owed, I can almost guarantee you that that which you and I do have right now is already worth celebrating and being immensely grateful for. This is why David prayed, "Restore to me the joy of my salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me." Unfortunately, we don't really appreciate what we have, usually, until it's no longer there. There's this quote that says, "You fear losing those you love, yet you lose them every day by failing to be present while they live." And I don't need to tell you how much that stings after the fact, after we've regained our senses and had our perspectives restored. Then, when the veil is lifted, when we realize just how ungrateful we had been, it's usually too late. Don't wait until you've lost your parents before you start appreciating who they were. Don't wait until your friends have moved away before you let them know how much they mean to you. Don't wait until you've achieved your dream outcome in life before you start allowing yourself to enjoy what you have and who you have it with. The Bible says the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and the modern world has all but surrendered itself to that agenda. So please understand that as much as we would like to downplay the effects of this abstract spiritual condition in our lives, what we are experiencing is nothing less than a demonic attack on our souls, aimed at stealing our joy, killing our relationships, and destroying our legacies. And that brings me to the end of this video. Hopefully, if you've made it to this point, you should also be convicted of the seriousness of your own ungratefulness, as I've had to be. I would like to encourage you to think back on this video and consider all the ways in which this very sneaky and deceptive emotion steals your livelihood by bringing sabotage into your relationship with God, bringing suffering upon others, and bringing a lasting regret after it has done the first two. And then I'd like to encourage you to watch my next video, where I will go into detail about how we can more effectively combat this fallen emotion in our lives, or otherwise suffer the consequences. On that light note, thank you very much, dear viewer. All the best, and Godspeed.